The iPhone 15 is right around the corner, and a bunch of new features will come with it. Apart from the obvious hardware and design changes, even the iPhone factory will be majorly revised, the biggest of which will be a completely new production location. Where will iPhones be produced from now on, and what will this new iPhone factory look like? Join us as we peek inside Apple's shocking iPhone 15 factory. The iPhone was an instant hit ever since it originally came out. Even though it was always one of the most expensive phones on the market, the iPhone brand was, and still is, the most sought-after brand in the business. This is because they were always beautifully designed pieces of everyday technology that have been made to a high standard, with high-quality materials and impeccable fit and finish. The high-quality exterior of the phone has also been complemented by high-end hardware and by far the most stable mobile OS on the market. What do you think of the iOS? Do you like the fact that it's stable, or do you prefer the modularity of the Android OS? Be sure to let us know in the comment section down below. All of this makes it all the more surprising to know that the iPhones have almost exclusively been assembled in China ever since the original one. More than 150 production facilities owned by Apple are located in China, and the biggest one is by far the Foxconn Zhengzhou factory, which employs over 350,000 workers. The whole complex is so enormous, in fact, that it's widely known as the iPhone City. If you own an iPhone, chances are that it came from here, as more than 500,000 phones are made by Foxconn Zhengzhou daily. Granted, this is only during summer, before the official release of the upcoming iPhone, but putting out 350 iPhones a minute is extremely impressive. Overall, the iPhone City accounts for more than half of the total iPhones produced. The Zhengzhou isn't the only factory complex that Apple has at its disposal, but it is by far the most venerable one, as it localizes a lot of different production processes into a singular location, which significantly speeds up processes and almost completely cuts off any shipping and transportation costs. However, in the past couple of years, the relations between China and the US have been less than ideal, especially after China decided to support Russia. There were also a couple of strikes and revolts that halted production of the iPhone a couple of times during the past year. Apple has therefore decided to reduce its dependency on China as much as possible, until it eventually cut ties with the country completely. And they've already started to look for alternative countries where they'll start manufacturing their products. Where will iPhones be produced from now on? The most logical answer to this question was India. Apple officials have confirmed that they'll be moving production of the iPhone to India, as their products have already been assembled there, so they wouldn't need to start from scratch. This made India the perfect candidate for a fully fledged production of iPhones, the first of which will be the upcoming iPhone 15. India offers a lot of benefits, as it is much less developed compared to China, and they're aching for foreign investments. China has become one of the most developed countries in the world, and their work hour rate has gone up significantly. This ate into Apple's profits, whereas moving production to India, which already had thriving Apple assembly plants, meant that Apple was going to save a lot of money, while also managing to develop a production plant of similar capacities as the Foxconn Zhengzhou. Apple will not only shift the production of the iPhone into India, but they'll also start producing the Apple Pencil there very shortly, and they'll eventually shift the production of their entire product palette. Foxconn and Apple also chose India because of their never-ending need for workers, and India, which is the second most populated country in the world, offers exactly that. This change of location and the lower cost of production that comes with it might also impact the pricing of the iPhone. It might get more affordable. However, that is still just mere speculation, and we won't know that for sure until Apple officially announces the pricing. The lower production costs aren't going to affect the quality of the product though, as Apple plans to make the production plant as advanced as possible, which leads us to the question, what will this new factory look like? We can assume that it'll look like the Foxconn Zhengzhou production plant. So instead of a singular factory or numerous factories scattered across the country, Apple will make an entire town consisting of factories and assemblies to further lower transportation costs and increase production times. Foxconn has already bought more than 300 acres of land in the southern state of India, Karnataka, close to the already established Apple assembly plant. Foxconn is planning to invest over $700 million in the plant so they can ramp up local production and make the complex as advanced as the Zhengzhou one as soon as possible. The Karnataka factory complex will offer all kinds of jobs, from working on the production and assembly lines, janitors, to truck and van drivers, over to many other office jobs. It'll truly be a prosperous venture for Apple, but also for India, as many Indians are struggling to find adequate or even any work. The fact that the company will employ tens of thousands of workers at a singular location means that the complex will, just like the Zhengzhou plant, most likely include a dormitory area where the workers will sleep. These dorms are 10 to 12-story buildings that are going to be located on the outskirts of the complex, and in their nearest vicinity, workers will be able to find different kinds of restaurants, stores, etc., which also means the massive factory complex will also be a great catalyst for small business growth, just as it was in Zhengzhou. Apart from buildings that'll make the complex look like a city, the plant will also have wide boulevards, multiple bus stops, and many other things that are typical for cities, and which were already seen in the Zhengzhou plant. So saying that this whole complex looks like a city would be an understatement, as it'll also function like a real city, and we can expect the production plant that's planned for Karnataka will be as impressive as the one found in Zhengzhou. Unfortunately, Apple will not be shifting the entirety of its production from China just yet. They're going to reduce the production output, sure. However, China will still bring in the most profits for the company, as Apple doesn't need to invest any large sums in the factories that are found there for them to be profitable. The production process is already well developed, and it'll take some time before Foxconn and other Apple suppliers like Pegatron pack up their things and leave China for good. The Karnataka plant is at the moment considerably smaller than the Zhengzhou one, and it'll also employ up to 100,000 workers, which is 3.5 times lower than what the iPhone city employs. Also, even though Apple is thriving towards a complete centralization of production, that simply won't happen, as the parts that are found in iPhones are made in different countries from all over the world, like Germany, China, and even the US. iPhones are only getting assembled in these major production plants, and these components are, for the most part, either left alone, or they're simply getting tweaked or finished. And there's the problem of strikes that were happening in the iPhone city. Who's to say that similar stuff won't happen in India? After all, it was Apple, or to be more precise, Foxconn, who was responsible for these strikes, as their negligence and the general attitude towards its workers led the entire complex to a momentary halt numerous times. These halts cost Apple dearly, as it's estimated that the company lost more than $200 million per strike day, which is very concerning. That said, India will see a huge increase in production numbers, as more than 25% of all iPhones produced will come from India. Let's also not mention the fact that Apple plans to open smaller factories and assembly plants too, which will further localize production. Granted, things will still be produced all over the world, however, the total amount of travel that parts need will be reduced. Plus, let's not forget that robots are getting more and more popular by the day, and that the lower number of employees found in the Karnataka plant might be because Apple, alongside many other corporations, plans to implement robots into the production process in the very near future. A commercial drone is a small unmanned aircraft with an onboard camera that captures a bird's-eye view of the ground. It collects up-to-the-minute data, useful for many types of applications, such as planning infrastructure projects, managing farmland, and not to mention capturing those stunning movie aerials. Spanning 1.5 meters in diameter, this commercial drone is known as an octocopter because it has 8 rotors which enable it to maneuver like a helicopter. Most of the drone's components are made of carbon fiber, a strong, durable material that's also lightweight, a critical factor in aviation. A computer-guided milling machine cuts the parts before their edges are sanded smooth. This component will form half of one of the drone's legs. The mill also cuts out the upper and lower frames for the drone's body. The 2 halves of each leg are then assembled. Some of the drone's components are produced by a 3D printer that builds the parts layer by layer out of a thin stream of plastic. This component is one of the drone's 8-arm receptacles. A hole is bored, into which the arm will be inserted when the drone is set up for flight. When not in use, the arm can be detached to make storage and transport easier. The hole must be precise to ensure a secure fit. Digital calipers are used to verify its diameter before the back part of the receptacle is installed, along with a lever that clamps the inserted arm firmly in place. An electronic speed controller is attached to one end. The receptacle is then screwed to the lower frame of the drone's body. The controller's wires will connect to an electrical power harness and to the autopilot, the onboard computer that runs the drone. The 7 remaining receptacles are then installed, along with the power harness. The harness has 8 connectors, 1 for each electronic speed controller. Next, the upper frame is attached, followed by the payload mount that holds the camera and the drive which stores the data. The payload mount is linked to a servo motor, which is guided by the autopilot. The drone's body is protected by a cover. To make it, a sheet of plastic is mounted on a vacuum forming machine, and the machine's heating element is switched on. The plastic is positioned beneath it and slowly heated to a malleable state. Once the plastic is soft, a wooden mold is placed in position before the suction is activated. The sheet is now lowered onto the mold, and the vacuum draws the plastic tightly against it. The vacuum-formed plastic is set aside to cool and harden, before any excess is carefully trimmed off. A rough opening for the payload mount is then cut, through which the cover is secured to the computer-guided milling machine. This finalizes the shape to precise specifications. Once the cover is complete, it's installed on the upper frame. Four legs are now attached to the lower frame. The camera is then installed onto the payload mount. The mount pivots to angle the camera at the ground. The arms are inserted into the receptacles and clamped in position. Each arm is a carbon fiber tube with a plastic rotor that's driven by a small motor underneath. When an arm is inserted, its motor makes contact with the electronic speed controller. An autopilot is also installed. It will execute a programmed flight path and operate the camera. It also operates the servo motor that moves the payload and the electronic speed controllers. The drone operator can communicate wirelessly with the autopilot using remote control. And now we know how this is made. In the early part of the 20th century, headphones were used mainly by telephone operators and radio technicians. But in the 1930s, they were redesigned and marketed to the public. So music lovers everywhere plugged in and turned on to the concept. Everyone loves music, but not necessarily other people's. Headphones allow people to listen without negative feedback from your neighbors. To make high-end headphones, an injection molding machine first makes the plastic speaker covers. The mesh area will allow sound waves to pass through, instead of reflecting back into the headphones. Equipment stamps trademark and other information onto 2 more casing components, a decorative metal disc and a plastic housing. The next machine winds copper wire around a cylinder hundreds of times. The wire is as thin as human hair. The winding is computer controlled to produce a critical component, the headphone's voice coil. When magnetized by an incoming signal, the voice coil vibrates a diaphragm, causing it to emit sound. That diaphragm now takes shape as a press applies heat and pressure to a plastic membrane. The press molds the plastic so it's thicker in the center and thinner around the outer zone. This gives a wide and flat audio frequency range. A technician punches out the molded shape. She applies a bead of glue to the diaphragm, then positions the copper voice coil in an assembly device. She aligns the glued section of the diaphragm with the coil. Ultraviolet light activates the glue to seal the coil to the diaphragm. The plastic housings each contain a magnet. The next technician installs the diaphragm and voice coil assembly on that housing. This takes skill, because the coil must be positioned precisely for the best sound quality. This headphone speaker is now ready for an audio check. A technician tests the audio frequency range, distortion, and other factors. Here, a technician joins the ends of curved wires in a plastic clip. These wires serve a dual function. They hold the headphones snugly over the ears and deliver audio signals from the left side of the headphones to the right. The next technician installs a connector for the headphones audio cable in a plastic strain reliever. An adjustable band will allow the headphones to fit on heads of all shapes and sizes. The operator presses the parts together with a hydraulic tool. Moving down the line, a technician now joins the two halves of the speaker housing. She forces the two parts together with a pneumatic tool and finishes it off with a decorative metal ring. She inserts the speaker mechanism in the center of the housing, then places plastic brackets over it for protection. She then secures the entire assembly to the housing. Next, she solders two wires to each headphone speaker. A plastic ring and cover protect it, while still allowing the wires to protrude. She attaches the end of the headband to the speakers. Then solders the wires from the speaker to those protruding from the headband. She presses a plastic grill into place over each speaker, very carefully to prevent scratching. These headphones are now wired for sound. And whether you like Pet Shop Boys or Puccini, your choice of music will be silent all but one individual.
Thank you for watching at Ronnie's Mind Palace. We talks everything, never boring. God bless us all.